Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Third Thursdays with Tom and Tim. I'm Tim Nutt.
I'm Tom Dillard, and we welcome you to this first in what we hope will be a series of discussions about Arkansas history, culture, politics, books, art, whatever.
And then we're also hoping to do some interviews on each show, talking with people who are interested in Arkansas history, their research projects, and authors, artists, the whole spectrum of Arkansas history. So Tom and I think we've known each other, what, 30 years?
Yeah, probably just about 30 years.
Yeah, and I was a junior in college at UCA, and I had switched my major from accounting to history. And my advisor at that time asked me what I wanted to do, and I naively said that I liked working with old stuff. And so he gave Tom a call.
I got a call from Maurice Webb. Maurice was professor of history at the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, very popular teacher there, and a very fine individual. And I believe he was not only your advisor, but maybe a neighbor to your family.
He was. He had just purchased a farm or some acreage in New Dixie, Arkansas, right outside of Bigelow, suburbs of Bigelow in Perry County. And so he lived next door to my parents.
Perhaps you don't know about the metropolis of Bigelow. It's in Perry County. It's the home of a very wonderful Catholic church, which is Tim's church, St. Boniface. But anyhow, back to Maurice Webb's phone call. He said to me, I've got this young man who's a student, and he's majoring in accounting, and he thinks he's bored with it and would like to perhaps think about history as a major. And so I hired Tim on the spot. He was a junior, and he turned out to be a perfect person to work in the field of Arkansas studies. By the time he graduated, 2 years after hiring him, we had co-authored, and this is a student, an undergraduate student, we had co-authored an article in Arkansas Libraries, and I believe you had won a prize for your paper on North Little Rock history.
I did.
It had a wonderful name. What's the name of that article?
Floods, Flat Cars, and Floozies.
Floods, Flat Cars, and Floozies about North Little Rock.
Right.
North Little Rock's a fascinating place, very different from Little Rock, has its own interesting history. Anyhow, Tim went to work at the UCA archives, and before we knew it, he was on his way to becoming an archivist himself, a historian of some ability. It's been a great association through the years.
It has been, and I remember when I first started, there was a painting of John Gould Fletcher, the Arkansas poet, in the UCA archives, and I remember one day I asked Tom who was the person in the painting, and Tom, if you know Tom, you know this is exactly how he does. He puffs up his chest and he says, Tim, I could tell you who that person was, but then you wouldn't really learn anything. So why don't you research it, and you'll be a much better person for it. And so, which turned out to be true. I was a much better person for it. But
well, I would not tell that story in the same way, but it is true that Tim really got into Arkansas history in a big sort of way. We're in his library tonight, by the way. You see some of the collection that he has here. He has a great Arkansas collection. His specialty is fiction, Arkansas fiction. And so I'm probably sitting in the room with the largest collection of Arkansas novels to be had anywhere.
You can't see the fiction. The fiction's on the other side of the screen. Tom's actually sitting in being a librarian and archivist, you know, all my books are categorized. So Tom's actually in front of the local history section. right
Before
there.
I finish sort of introducing Tim, let me say that he has a history degree from UCA, and then he went over to the University of Oklahoma and got his Master of Library Science. He's also taken other courses and extended study in other fields. He's become somewhat of an authority on Arkansas censorship law and has written on that subject, among others.
And actually, I have worked for Tom 3 different times in my career. So I first met you at UCA when you were the archivist at UCA, the founding archivist at UCA. And then you came to the Butler Center. You were the founding curator of the Butler Center for Arkansas Studies at Central Arkansas Library System. And I worked for you there. And then you went to University of Arkansas and become the director of the special collections there. And then I followed you up there and became assistant head of special collections. And then you retired, and I had to find my own way after that.
I think Tim has found his way pretty much by himself all along, actually. Tim, what'd you get for Christmas?
I had a really nice Christmas, actually, and I always ask for Arkansas books for Christmas, among other things, and usually it's Arkansas fiction, and so I got a couple of Arkansas fiction books, but I got a few other things that I was really glad to get, including this poster. I'll see if I can unroll it, and a poster of Arkansas that I'll get framed and hang in Coley at work. And then I also got an Arkansas book, not a nonfiction book, and it's actually on by Eugene Bible. See if you can see that. And it's My Voyage to Europe and the Holy Land in 1913. And Bible was a priest. And at the time that he wrote this, he was the priest at St. John's Church in Hot Springs. And so this is an account of his trip to Europe and to the Holy Land. And so I was really, one of my research interests is Catholicism in Arkansas. So I was really glad to get that book.
Tim has quite a collection on Arkansas Catholicism. This book by Bible is an important work, and Bible himself was an important individual. He was called the Catholic Apostle to Northeast Arkansas. He founded so many churches in Northeast Arkansas, and also schools, convents. He brought the Benedictine nuns to Jonesboro. I guess St. Bernard's Hospital is a product of Father Bible's work in Arkansas. Did he establish St. John's in Hot Springs?
He did. After he spent, I think, close to 30 years in Northeast Arkansas, and then he was transferred, the Bishop of Little Rock transferred him to Hot Springs, where he founded St. John's Church. And I think that was around 1908.
There's an interesting story about Bible. And you know, Northeast Arkansas was pretty rustic at that time when he went there in the 1880s.
Yeah, early 1880s.
One of the stories that's told about him is that he, one morning getting ready for Mass, he threw open the doors of a cabinet where he kept the religious materials for Mass, and lo and behold, there was a rattlesnake in the cabinet. I think the point that he was trying to make is that these were circumstances that were not good for Catholic missionaries in Northeast Arkansas, but he persevered. And that's pretty much the word that summarizes Catholic history in Arkansas is perseverance.
What did you get for Christmas?
Well, never enough, of course, but I too often request materials for Christmas and for my birthday that are of an Arkansas nature. My birthday is Christmas Eve. one of the things I got was this book, Bass Reeves. This is, in today's modern terminology, this is called a graphic novel. I call it a comic book. Bass Reeves, it's good to see Arkansas subjects being treated in a variety of different ways to reach different audiences. And Bass Reeves was an African-American U.S. Marshal based in Fort Smith, where he worked for over 20 years as a U.S. Marshal. He worked for Judge Isaac Parker, the hanging judge. Anyhow, I have a large collection of African-American Arkansiana, and so this will become part of that.
Now, are there 2 issues so far from them?
Yes, these are the first 2 issues. And they are done by Alliance, which is a part of...
Alliance is a new company. It was founded by Mitch and Elizabeth Breitweiser, who were artists who both worked for Marvel Comics. And they just established this new publishing house to publish smaller runs and smaller subjects, different subjects other than the Marvel Comics. And they're based, I think they're originally from around up in Searcy, somewhere around there. I think they live in Little Rock now, but that's a newly formed company.
Very good. A second gift I received is a new volume of nonfiction on hot springs, and it's called In Search of Sexual Health. This book, and I see myself sitting here holding this up. It reminds me of Trump at the church, forgive me. But this book is an important first look at what was an important medical history development in Hot Springs. And that was an attempt to try to diagnose and treat syphilis on a large scale. It was part of the national health, public health program of the US government. And so much of the work that was done there between 1890 and 1940, 50 years of important work done. The author is Elliot Bowen. I do not know him. I think you've been in touch with him, Tim, because I think
we had him speak a couple of weeks ago for one of our lectures for the Society for the History of Medicine and Health Professions at UAMS. We had him speak on this book. He did a very good job. He's a very nice person. It's interesting where he's located, and
he's at the Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. So when he was doing that program recently for Tim's History of Medicine series, he did it from Kazakhstan.
He did, and he's 12 hours ahead, so we had to adjust and make sure that he didn't have to get up so early in the morning to talk about this. We had someone who asked if you would hold back up the Bass Reeves book again, and so they could see. And someone does note that they are selling the comics at Walmart, and that is true. These are available at Walmart.
This is one of 2. So Walmart is a source for them.
And I'll also point out that it's interesting, the last few years, you've had sort of a surge of graphic novels and comic books on different subjects. There was a whole series on female politicians, and so there's a comic book on Hillary Clinton. And then a few years ago, there was actually a graphic novel written about Johnny Cash, which is interesting. So I think you're right about telling Arkansas history and just stories in general to a different type of audience.
It's a different way of getting the word out.
Yeah,
and I think that's great. I might, in closing, talking about that book from Hot Springs, I would like to mention that it's one of 3 important books on Hot Springs that's come out just recently. I have right here All the Young Men. It's about valiant effort by a woman in Hot Springs to come to the aid of patients suffering from the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s. It's a wonderful story. It should be known well beyond Arkansas. And then another book, a nonfiction book that came out of Hot Springs, is called The Vapors. And I'm embarrassed to say that I have not read any of these three books, but they're on my bedside stand, and I hope to get to them soon, and maybe we can talk about them at the next show.
All the Young Men, I read the autobiography. That's Ruth Coker Burks who wrote this, and I read this over the Christmas break, and it's a very well written autobiography. And then it is interesting that last year you had 3 books on Hot Springs come out. You had The Vapors, you had Sexual Health by Elliot Bowen, and then you had All the Young Men come out. We had someone who wanted to see the poster again, and tell me and to say a little bit about the poster. I think the poster itself, it's not an Arkansas artist, but they do these for all 50 states. And a friend of mine got this for me for Christmas because he knows that I pretty much like anything Arkansas. So, but it was purchased from it's called 50 States of Beauty in Madison, Tennessee, and they have a website, 50 statesofbeauty.com. So you can check that out, and I can send you the link if someone's interested in that. We have a comment that says Reeves's firearms are on display at the Gun Museum at Bass Pro in Springfield, Missouri.
Really?
So that's interesting. Now, it's interesting that these 3 Hot Springs books that we've mentioned are from national publishers. The Sexual Health is from Johns Hopkins University. All the Young Men, Grove Press, I think. But of course, we have the University of Arkansas Press here in Arkansas that publishes a large number of Arkansas books as well.
I don't think we can say enough about the importance of the University of Arkansas Press. You know, when they started back in
1980, was it
1980, when they started that press, it was the beginning of a real renaissance in Arkansas publishing. And now, after all of those decades, we finally have a large reservoir of important published material in the state of Arkansas and many other subjects. The University of Arkansas Press is the premier publisher of Arkansas materials, but it publishes a lot of other things. They have a specialty in poetry, for example. They have the Miller Williams Poetry Prize that they award each year, which is a rather substantial prize and highly regarded in the world of poetry and literature. And they just, U of A Press has been good year after year after year. And it is my hope that more people will contact U of A Press and ask to be on their mailing list and receive updates on new books that are coming out all the time. Just in the last year, we've seen so many wonderful things. Kathleen Condre from the U of A at Fayetteville has done a wonderful book on the German language newspaper that published in Little Rock for a long time called the Arkansas Echo. That's a really fine book. They're just one after another that's coming out. And I really urge you to Google U of A Press, and you'll find links there to request a catalog and forms there to order things. It's a great resource for Arkansas, the University of Arkansas Press.
Well, and Griff Stockley is on watching us right now, and they published his great Blood in Their Eyes. The second edition just came out last year, I believe.
Yes, there's so many seminal works on Arkansas history that have been published by the U of A Press. Blood in Their Eyes being an important one. You know, the Elaine Race Massacre of 1919 was called the Elaine Race Riots for years. And that represented the lack of knowledge about that tragic event, one of the most tragic events in American race history. And Griff Stockley stepped up, a lawyer, a novelist of some renown, stepped forward and took on the subject of the Elaine disaster. And it is to his credit that he has found out so much important stuff. And then there have been other publications come out on this subject. Also, a fellow named Whitaker wrote a book called In the Laps of the Gods. But Griff's book through the U of A Press, Blood in Their Eyes, is worth reading. There is a second edition that's just come out with some additional information and other people involved in that. I want to say that Griff Stockley is a dear friend of mine. He is somebody who has inspired me. He is just a great man. And I thank him for all the work that he has done in the field of Arkansas studies. It's just been miraculous. His book titled about race,
Ruled by Race?
Ruled by Race, is a really important book that summarizes race history well before and after the Elaine massacres. Anyhow, glad to have Griff Stockley with us tonight.
And Griff, actually, you know, Griff is very a well-rounded author because he started out writing fiction,
right?
Before he went into nonfiction. He had the Gideon Page mysteries, so that's how I first became familiar with Griff. And then, so he's a great guy. If you don't know Griff, you should get to know him.
Griff's legal work, I should add here, sort of as an afterthought. Griff Stockley's legal work. It was public service legal work. He worked for public agencies for many, many years, and he had a profound role in forcing a change in the way that Arkansas deals with youthful offenders and children in need. Griff Stockley. Great guy.
And Griff said that he wants to thank you for the initial idea of both the race book or Blood in Their Eyes.
Well, when we were at the Butler Center, I think it was in 1990, Tim and I organized a conference at Helena on the Elaine.
It wasn't 1990. I was still in college in 1990. It was 2000.
It was 2000, 10 years later. Yeah. We organized a conference over in Helena. We knew, of course, that the centennial of that event was coming up in a few years. Anyhow, we wanted to draw attention to it. And so we had a conference in Helena. There was a lot of local pushback, I might point out, from some of the old timers over there. But we had an incredible turnout. We had over 1,700 people, including several hundred public school students, who came out for various parts of that conference. And the thing that came out of that was so shocking was that the local folks, the local Black folks in particular, knew very little about the Elaine massacre. The refrain that we heard, Tim, over and over and over again at that conference was, "This is the first I've ever heard of that." Mm-hmm. And this was from people of all ages.
Well, another poignant moment during that conference was that some of the African Americans said that was the first time. It was held in the old theater in Helena, and they said that was the first time they had been in that theater where they didn't have to sit up in the balcony.
In the balcony, yeah. It had been a segregated theater on Cherry Street, I believe. But anyhow, from that conference, I came away with a desire to do what we could. Griff got interested in that subject. Griff worked, for example, to get some sort of memorial. He kept saying, "Why can't we get some sort of memorial over here?" Well, anyhow, the book grew out of all of that, and it's a major, major contribution.
Well, we're glad to have Griff here tonight, online watching us for that. So I think we're ready to bring our first guest. We're glad to have our first guest on on this premiere episode. And so Roy Dudley is here from Little Rock. He is owner of Roy Dudley Estate Sales. And Roy, we're glad to have you here tonight.
It's great to join you guys.
So Roy, tell us a little bit about how you got started in the estate sales business, and how long you've been in there, and some of the favorite items that you've seen during the years.
There's really not a time in my life that I was not involved with antiques. So my earliest memories are going to farm auctions in the Washington, Madison County area of Arkansas with my parents. And I sort of parlayed into my mom buying a lot of things and reselling them out of her barn. And I just sort of always have been around that. And when I got out of college, I opened a booth in an antique mall in Fayetteville. And then when I moved to Little Rock after college, I had a booth here, and I was an antiques dealer for years. And then in the mid-90s, I started doing estate sales for friends. And in 2000, my corporate job ended, and I started Roy Dudley Estate Sales officially as a business. And so we're 21, about 25 really, but 21 actual years in. And sort of asking a favorite item is sort of like asking you what your favorite child is, you know, because I love every sale. I love what I do. And I'm a firm believer that every sale has something wonderful in it. You just have to find it. And, you know, we've been able to add, you know, things to museum collections. I know Tom's been involved with us in that. We liquidated a fabulous Adrian Brewer collection, famous Arkansas artist, several years ago, and that was a great sale and a great honor to do that for the late Jeff and Cleo Davis. I think some of the things that I've enjoyed the most are just sort of more mundane things. Things that really come from nature. One of my very favorite possessions is a large burled piece of wood that looks exactly like a human heart. You know, I just think that something occurred in nature, and that truly is one of a kind. And those are the things that I personally respond to the most.
We, you might not remember this, but we purchased, when you and I were both up at Fayetteville, we purchased Rosa
Hankey.
The Rosa Hankey diary. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And so you advertised that on your website, I think, or we became aware of it, and
actually, I think there's a great story with that. As I went out to look at this family's estate in Mableville, and they had been in that house and on that farm since the 1870s, and it was nieces and nephews of their great aunts, and they had cleaned the attic out that day, and there was a huge portable dumpster in the yard, and I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, we cleaned the dumpster out." And I said, "We cleaned the attic out." And I said, "Well, what about all the stuff in the attic?" "Oh, no one wants that old stuff." And I said, "I'll tell you what, we were going to start a few weeks later." And I said, "Let me bring my guys out and we'll move the stuff in the dumpster to the carport and go through it. We'll still trash what is truly trash." And my friend Kate Askew was helping us with that sale. And we were in there rooting. We found this diary that was destined already for the dumpster. And we connected to U of A through Kate, but we're able to save that, and it was fabulous.
And the diary was she it was the World War II down in the Japanese internment, right?
Yeah, she was the summer, she was a teacher, and every summer she went to Rower and she taught art to the students and then turned people at Rower. And this was her diary, including, you know, naming the people she worked with, the children, what they did in their daily life, what projects she did. It was just really a fascinating opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's interesting because you had a similar experience when of going to some collection or a house and walking out and there were garbage bags out covered with snow, wasn't it? Wasn't there something?
Yes. And about when I was at UCA, I got a call in I saw an obituary, and I finally decided that man in that obituary had to have left some papers. It was just, his obituary was so interesting. And so I went to his home he had lived in. When I got there, it had snowed very heavily, and all of these trees around the house were just bowed over and covered with snow. I later found out those were not trees at all. Those were black plastic bags full of papers that someone had thrown out of the upstairs windows, and they had accumulated all the way around the house, and they looked like shrubs underneath the snow. But you know, we didn't lose any of those things. Those bags were tightly tied and they came out all right. So you were literally dumpster diving in that particular case.
Yeah, well, you know, some of the best finds are the ones that are literally, we've saved so many things from the trash. It's true, another man's trash, one man's trash is another man's treasure. That's so true.
Now, you've been working on a house, and you have an upcoming sale, I believe, in February, and you have stuff that you brought to show us, right?
Right. I brought some things to show us, and we'll talk about the sale too.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen right now, Roy, while you talk about the items.
Okay, and you guys jump in and talk about them too. Okay, yeah, that the first photo you're showing is one of a Hot Springs tourist photo. It's from McLeod Studios, McLeod, and Tom knows a lot about this, but it's really a fabulous photo, and it's quite large. It's about an 8 by 10.
Mm-hmm.
This is the standard Norm McLeod photograph, the Wild West photographer, as he promoted himself. Norm McLeod was an interesting guy. He came here in the late 1800s and to Hot Springs, and he set up a photographic studio. And then he developed an attraction called Happy Hollow. It was free of charge. Anybody could come and visit. And the way he made his money was by putting all these tourists into rustic settings and taking photographs of them. And he did tens of thousands of them. Many of these people were prosperous visitors from other states, often there taking the baths, the spas, and his photographs ended up being all over the world. A few years ago, when Tim and I were working at the Butler Center in Little Rock, we found on eBay, we found this wonderful photograph from McLeod being sold by a man in Australia. I think McLeod is important in Arkansas image history because his photographs and all of his backdrops were rustic. He had falling down log cabins. He had a resident Indian in costume. He had a black bear. When the bear died, he had it chained on this log structure. When the black bear died, he had it stuffed and put on the porch where it was used for many, many years. But I think his significance is that he reinforced the image of Arkansas's backwardness for a long, long time. He didn't close this, he didn't sell this operation until 1909. And it's a great photograph, Roy.
Yeah, it's really swell. We've had several smaller ones, you know, postcard size, but we've never had one this big, and it's very, very interesting. So I'm excited to offer that.
The image on the right part of the screen is the imprint that Norm McLeod put on the back of the photograph.
Okay.
Every photograph he used to promote himself in some fashion.
And the interesting thing about this photo is that the people are identified on the back. Which you usually don't find in the photographs. True. And then also on the back of this is, in addition to his imprint, there's also a song about Happy Hollow on the back of it. So Roy, we're not going to ask you to sing that, though.
Thank you, and the world thanks you for that. Okay, the next thing we have, which is really cool, it's a coupon book for the Desert Toll Bridge. And I've never seen one of these. I'm not sure exactly what time period it's from, but it does include an auto and a driver. So it's awfully after the automobiles. But it was found just in a box of stuff, and there are still tickets inside it, so I guess it would still work. But it's very interesting piece of Arkansas ephemera. You know, I've never seen one or knew there was a toll bridge there.
I've never seen a coupon book like
I've
that.
never seen a coupon book either, but toll bridges were not unknown at all in Arkansas. The one that when they finally put a bridge in at Russellville to replace the pontoon bridge there, that was a toll bridge, and the toll booths were in place for a long period of time. I don't think there are any toll roads or toll bridges in Arkansas today, but for many years, the state did not have money to develop infrastructure. We didn't tax ourselves for so many years. And so we didn't have much in the way of infrastructure. And sometimes private businesses stepped in to fill the void.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is my favorite photo, and this is of the Strand Theater in Clarksville, Arkansas, in 1919. And we also have, it's not shown here, we have the ticket to the movie as well as the photo and identified as Clarksville, Arkansas, which I believe that theater is still there on the main street of Clarksville. It's probably altered a bit, but I do think I remember the Strand being there. But I love the car. I love that it's a Clarksville, Arkansas photo. I love the movie connection, and it's really in great shape.
Yeah, and this is what movie is playing there, Roy?
Puppy Love.
Puppy Love.
Puppy Love, yeah.
Puppy Love. So, you know, it is interesting that there's the ticket stub from this goes with this photograph, which I think is really
Yeah, it was very odd that those two would remain together, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you know, that's just not an image. That time period, you know, in Arkansas, that's a great image to have.
Well, and I would think that, you know, probably images of theaters in Little Rock or larger cities are more common than
Right.
theaters in Clarksville or other or smaller cities.
That was a real find. It was exciting to find that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is, I posted a few photos on my Facebook page this weekend to sort of tease about the upcoming sale. And this photo has got so much response. It's a postcard, and it's from Elmira, Arkansas, which I think Tim told me was near Stuttgart. But it's a saloon. And if you notice, there's a ladder on the roof. And I don't know if they just finished painting the saloon or they left the ladder up there or they were thirsty. But anyway, the ladder is still on the roof and it's in Elmira, Arkansas, which I think is really cool.
That ladder doesn't look like it's long enough to go up high enough to paint that saloon, or maybe that's a...
That's true, but that was the biggest Facebook question was did we notice the ladder on the roof? And I said we did. So.
I've never seen a photo of a saloon. Have you? I mean,
there are many pictures of saloons, but saloons in small towns are quite rare. And Elmira qualifies as a small town. Saloons were found all over the state.
Yeah.
Some places today are dry as bone, like Searcy in White County, but I have in my own collection a wonderful saloon picture from Searcy. They were very common.
You know, right after the saloon went into Elmira, they thought about changing the name to Elmira. Elmira. That's not true. I just made that up. But
that's consumer. Okay, this is something that's very, very odd. It's an 1855 document giving a gentleman permission to serve alcohol to enslaved people in Bradley County, which is very unusual. And it's on a piece of beautiful blue paper. It's very pretty.
Are you sure that this is, I thought this was an indictment of him for...
I think retailing ardent spirits without any license on inquiry of Charles Spears, and
he's being indicted for selling liquor.
Oh, okay. So it's not permission. He's getting in trouble.
Without permission. Without permission.
No. It was illegal to sell.
Well, yeah, but it says without permission.
Yeah. I guess you maybe someone who had some enslaved property could give you permission. I don't know, but
No.
selling liquor to slaves was a very common offense. It was, the indictment books in Pulaski County are just filled with it.
Really?
Yes, it's very common. This is Bradley County, 1855. You don't see very much from Bradley County.
No.
Not a heavily populated area. This would be a real treasure for a museum in Southeast Arkansas.
It would be very neat. There's a lot of things that we didn't bring photos and pictures of. There's a lot of historic Arkansas things. There's a huge Arkansas postcard collection. There are a lot of photographs having to deal with Arkansas subjects, as well as Arkansas photographs by photography studios here in Arkansas of Arkansans. It's just a really fascinating collection. This gentleman collected his whole life, and he really collected some great things. A huge postcard collection, a huge photo collection from daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, CDVs, cabinet cards, snapshots, ephemera, a huge autograph collection, a huge coin collection, a stamp collection. He was really just sort of a Renaissance man of collections, and we were lucky enough to help the family liquidate that. The sale will be held at our Tanglewood location, which is at Cantrell in Mississippi. It will be, I'm looking at Valentine's Day weekend, which would begin on Friday, February 12th, from 10 until 3, and all items will be for sale at that point. We're not going to do any pre-sales of paper, so we'll just be, all those items will be available for sale on the 12th of February, and it is immense. It's probably, to date, the largest ephemera show we've ever had. We have one that will be larger later this year, but this one is the biggest one we've ever done to date, and it's been a lot of fun organizing it. And
Roy, you'll advertise this on your Facebook page.
I'll do Facebook, Instagram, and then also on our website with an email sending out to our subscribers. So,
I'm looking forward to the sale. I'm excited about it.
well,
It's
Tim,
important. To me, it's really important that Arkansas materials not be thrown in the dumpster, that we try to keep them out there and keep them in circulation. You know, I've been a collector of Arkansiana practically all my life, and it's a great hobby to have. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money on it, and it's just fun. And I'm glad, Roy, to see you saving these pieces of Arkansiana and getting them out there.
Thank you. It's great fun, and like I say, it's such an honor. And we learn something every day. And today I've learned about spirits license and saloons and all kinds of stuff, and there's a lot more to learn tomorrow.
And you have a sale coming up this weekend. I know it's not as big as the ephemera sale, but you do have some Arkansas items in this sale coming up.
Yeah, there's a 1958 Central High yearbook, and then the entire published student newspaper from 1958, bound. There's a wonderful early 19th century map of Arkansas. It's from the 1822 is the time that the map was created. I don't know the exact age of the map. And just in general, some Arkansas memorabilia things. It's a very interesting sale, not heavy on ephemera, but the few things that are there are interesting. Lots of, Gazette items, old newspapers, photographs, things like that.
And where is that one? Where's that sale?
11041 Rivercrest Drive, which is in West Little Rock in the Walton Heights neighborhood. It's a very nice, clean sale. It was the cleanest people I've ever worked for.
Thank you, Roy. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. We're going to, I think that brings up a good point. Something that Roy said in the postcards and the documents talks about the primary documents and how important they are in doing research, whether it be Arkansas history research or any other type of research.
Yeah, you hear historians talking about primary sources all the time. Primary sources are those items that are sort of eyewitness accounts, contemporary with the event that's being discussed. And I love coming across these primary sources that in just maybe a small little article will encapsulate something really interesting or unusual. For example, I have here in front of me an Arkansas Gazette clipping from January the 14th, 1873, a death notice. The Reverend John Payton. We are pained to learn of the death of Reverend John Payton, colored, for many years a minister of the Methodist Church of this city. Now remember, this is 1873, not long after the Civil War. He was brought here in childhood and lived for many years on the McLean place, and always bore the reputation of a good, upright, and useful man. But here's the interesting part of this clipping. You get on down here in this sort of obituary, and the editor of the Gazette says, if he had been ambitious of political honors or imbued with the spirit of demagoguery, which has led to many of his race, he might have stood among the foremost of the colored politicians of the day, but he was content with the humble place of the sexton of a city cemetery, which he held until recently, and he has now gone on to his better reward in a better place. No word of reproach has ever tarnished his good name. What that white editor did not know was that not only was John Payton politically active, he was a part of the handful of people who established the Reconstruction Republican Party in Little Rock in April of 1867. It is galling to think that somebody like that could die and then be written up in such an untruthful and dismissive sort of way, patronizing. It's really disgusting. Did you bring any primary sources?
I did not. I did not know we were talking about primary sources tonight. So thank you for springing that on me.
Well, you know, it keeps you young. But I love primary sources. Do we have time for one more?
We do.
I was really fascinated by an article in the Gazette from 1837. A young offender punished is the headline. During the sitting of the circuit court last week, George B. Ames, advertised at this place as an attorney at law and a professor of phrenology, was arraigned on 2 indictments for stealing, against which he made no defense. On Wednesday afternoon, he was brought before Judge Caldwell, and he was sentenced to receiving 10 stripes with a rawhide for one of his offenses, and 30 stripes, or lashes is what they're meaning, for another offense, for a total of 40 lashes for this young lawyer. He was in debt for the amount of between $1,500 and $2,000, and he made no attempt to pay his bills. And so he was publicly lashed by a court in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1837. Interesting.
Well, newspapers are, of course, primary documents, and sometimes they're the only primary documents you can find in research. I'm doing conducting research right now on the first building for the medical school, the Sperandio Hotel and Restaurant at downtown Little Rock, in between Maine and Louisiana on 2nd. And I've used the newspapers to try and track the owner of that restaurant when he opened the restaurant in about 1870, and then he disappears from Little Rock in 1875. And then he appears by the searching newspapers.com. I found that he ended up in Dakota Territory, and he bought a mine there in Deadwood, South Dakota. And then he actually opened up another restaurant up there. So newspapers are great.
Newspapers are, in
research.
Arkansas, they're particularly important. You know, we didn't save our state records very well. We really didn't even have a state archives. During the Civil War, the state library was raided by the Confederate authorities and the books were torn up to use the pages for cartridges, for the manufacturing of cartridges. It's a miracle that we know really anything about our early history in Arkansas. And through the years, most Arkansas historians have been incredibly indebted to the Arkansas Gazette. It was indeed the newspaper of record for so long. And without it, Arkansas history would be almost impossible to resurrect. Right now, I'm doing research on the history of Chinese in Arkansas. And if it weren't for newspapers, we would know next to nothing about that very interesting minority group.
You have to research pretty much all the time since you write the newspaper column.
Writing a newspaper column, a weekly newspaper column is demanding. I keep about 90 file folders active at any given time where I'm filing materials on subjects that I think I might someday work on. I've been working on this Chinese topic for probably 20 years because it's such an interesting subject.
But think about how much easier it is to research now than it was 5-10 years ago when the newspapers weren't digitized, and how you did your research before and then how you do your research now.
Well, that brings us to the fact that newspapers are online and are searchable. Newspapers.com is a lifesaver for me. But Arkansas, we also have the Encyclopedia of Arkansas put out by the Butler Center in Little Rock. And the encyclopedia is so important to preserving and especially for educating people about our history. If you've never been to the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, I encourage you to do so.
I think that's probably the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. You and I both worked on that. We created it. I think that's probably, both of us would probably say that was each of our biggest accomplishments, one of our biggest accomplishments.
Right. Tim and I put together the program, which ultimately resulted in the encyclopedia. But the thing that I enjoyed so much about the encyclopedia, and that project was very fulfilling for me, is the number of people who got involved. It's truly collaborative, amazingly so. We have an excellent editor now, Guy Lancaster. It's a great resource.
I think we're coming to the end of our time tonight. We tried to keep this to an hour long. So we're glad to have you all here with us tonight. We're glad that Roy was here. Roy Dudley was here to share a little bit about what he does and some of the ephemera that he's going to have for sale next month. This will be a monthly event if we don't wear ourselves out. And
well, I'm always ready to talk. We have established, you have developed an email address for us. If anyone would like to get in touch with us relative to the show, let us know. It's
our email is, or it's just Third Thursdays, all spelled out, Third Thursdays with Tom and Tim at gmail.com. So send us an email if you have any questions. We can forward them to Roy if you have any questions about the sale. If you have any suggestions for topics or guests or whatever, please contact us at Third Thursdays with Tom and Tim at gmail.com. And let me make sure we don't have any questions. We had one question about the whipping clipping that you shared, where if you had any idea where the public whipping post was in 1837.
No, and I don't know that there was a public whipping post. I think this was a very unusual occurrence. and probably carried out quite informally.
Well, I think that the 1822, Roy says, is 1822 map that he mentioned is for sale for $350 at a sale up in Walton Heights this weekend. And we had a question about the email. It is Third Thursdays with Tom and A&D Tim, no ampersand, just the A&D at gmail.com. So Third Thursdays with Tom and Tim at gmail.com.
You worked up a graphic on that, but I gather you can't find it.
No, and as you said, technology will let you down every time. So, but Third Thursdays with Tom and Tim at gmail.com.
We're glad to have you with us tonight. We hope you'll join us next time as we delve deeper into the history of our little southern state.
Y'all take care. We'll see you later.
Bye.